Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 282 of ReelBlend, a podcast that sent Jake Hamilton to go be Speaker of the House for a little while. We want Kevin McCarthy back on our show, for God's sakes. Leave him alone.
How have your mentions been, Kev?
Oh, brutal. Absolutely brutal. I woke up to one in particular this morning that made me laugh. That was really disturbingly graphic. For people who don't know, I get hate tweets for my name being Kevin McCarthy. So I've just responded with movie reviews over the years. It started off with, I think, years ago with like Jake Tapper's show or something, like tweeted me by mistake.
To clarify, people mistaking you for a former Speaker of the House, not just your name, but they tag you thinking this must be
scream at him and scream at you. I will say, Kevin, in prep for the show today, I wanted to watch your Tom DeLonge interview, and you cannot search Kevin McCarthy on YouTube right now. It's impossible. And you can't search Tom DeLonge either because so much stuff comes up. So
somebody tweeted me I think they were like saying that it was my fault. I'll just read a quick one of these real fast. So someone tweeted me, they go, the only one person to blame for the shutdown at Kevin McCarthy TV. He's waited 10 hours before shutdown to vote. Hashtag Democrats wanted 90 minutes to read it. Normally 72 hours. Kevin said no. So I responded saying that I'd seen Oppenheimer 8 times. And that's why I hadn't had time to deal with that particular subject in the government. So I was busy, man. I was busy.
It's been a wild week. All right. On this week's show, welcome everybody. We're going to be doing Loki season 2, quick reaction to the first episode. I've been lucky enough to see a couple of them. I will keep all the spoilers out of it. Kev is going to review the Exorcist Believer, and then our guest this week, I've been sort of teasing out that there's been this upcoming slasher film that I'm a huge fan of. It is called Totally Killer, and the director is Nahnatchka Khan, who was lucky enough to join us for a very fun interview. We were lucky to have her on for a very fun interview on behalf of her new film, Totally Killer. We have already introduced Kevin McCarthy, but I'll give him his official. Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hello. Good afternoon to both Sean and Gabriel. And obviously Jake is not here today. We miss you, buddy. And looking forward to having you back next week. And also, we have some really good interviews coming up, so stay tuned. And there's a new bonus episode, which I think Sean will mention later on in the show. So stay tuned. Yeah,
that's very true. You should go to our YouTube channel and check that out. But before we get to that, sitting in the big boy chair, Gabe Kovach, sitting in for Jake Hamilton, who is tied up right now at the moment. So
that's true. That's true. A little bit of scheduling conflict, but I will do my best to fill his incredibly handsome, well-dressed shoes.
You're off to a good start.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'll say that much.
Thank you.
If you're watching us on YouTube, hello. Thank you very much for joining us. Head down, give us a like and a subscribe. Hit the comments. Let us know where you're listening to from and give us some feedback on the episode and, of course, the interview, which you guys will get to hear in a second. If you're listening on audio and want to see a visual element of the show, go to youtube.com/ReelBlend Podcast. Of course, the show is available all the different places you get your podcast needs met. You guys also have the opportunity to sign up for ReelBlend Premium. Quick plug for that. It gives you an ad-free version of the podcast and a newsletter from me. This is a newsletter week, I'm pretty sure. So you'll have one in your inboxes on Friday. So check the description for information on where to sign up. Kev mentioned a bonus episode that we dropped on all of our platforms in the middle of the week, and it was a conversation with Brian Duffield where he joined us to talk spoilers for his incredible film, No One Will Save You. I keep wanting to say No One Can Save You. Very specifically, it is No One Will Save You. And it stars Caitlin Dever as a girl who is going through a home invasion of sorts. I'm not even going to give details because there's a possibility people are listening to this and haven't yet seen it. It's on Hulu. It's available for streaming right now. Go press play on it right now. It's terrific. And then go listen to our conversation with Duffield because he's a really up and coming, talented director. And, he's going to be great.
He has a great story about meeting with Marvel and not getting a job. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Is that what you were going to say, Kev? It's so good.
No, my favorite thing. So we always joke with Sean about like how he'll watch like these masterpiece films, but he'll watch them on like TNT or Sci-Fi. So and again, I understand that, you know, everybody has their way of watching and it comes down to what you have in your home, if you have physical media or not, or streaming. And I get that streaming is very expensive. But the way Sean watches this, when you watch something on TNT, TNT or Sci-Fi, like big logos pop up about what's coming up next, or like there's commercial breaks. So Sean brought up the fact that Hulu has a commercial service, which is really an interesting thing. This was probably my favorite question of the interview, because I was genuinely interested in knowing this too. When I read Sean's questions for a little behind the scenes, we send an email thread to each other throughout the day when we're doing an interview, and we go through our questions. And I pay for the higher Hulu, I guess, or whatever, the one that doesn't have commercials. But Sean brought that up, and it was a really interesting bit to hear him talk about this. So I won't spoil his answer, but if you're fascinated to know how a filmmaker feels about commercial breaks, if they have any involvement in where those breaks are, what the science kind of goes behind the scenes at the studios of like when you jump into a break and when you don't, because there's two of them in the film. So that to me was a really fascinating aspect. So if you get a chance, check it out. It's really cool.
It's a really interesting insight, because I think, as he mentions, every streamer is moving to that. Disney, I think, is testing that, or I don't know if they've announced a date yet. I know Netflix has been testing that outside of the US markets, and I believe has confirmed that they're doing it. It seems like an inevitability. But it's a really interesting insight with someone who's like making a film right now and dealing with those decisions of what we might expect.
And we were having a conversation in our Cinema Blend editorial staff about whether, when you sit down on the couch to just kind of watch something, will you go to a streaming service that doesn't have commercials? If you're just going to look to put something on that's distracting. And I'm telling you this much, I will. I know that my HBO Max doesn't have commercials. I can burn through an episode of something. But just to give you an example, I wanted to get back into that Welcome to Wrexham with a new season coming up. And Hulu had it built in that I feel like I was watching legitimately a minute and a half of content and then another block of commercials. And it was driving me crazy. I couldn't even stay with it. It broke at like the weirdest possible places and went to a commercial block.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a growing... Sorry, I think it's going to be a growing pain for sure, because I think that what's going to win it first is what's going to make the most money, and then what's going to make the most money is going to be really anti-consumer, really anti-audience. And I assume it's going to have to hit a balance where ultimately, which I think has been the joke for a while, we're just going to go back to cable. These are all getting so expensive. We're all going to have to buy bundles to get more of them, and they're all going to have commercials, and they're going to be like, what if these were channels that you could just flip up and down and decide which? It's like it's all coming back together. So
Nahnatchka Khan's film, however, is not on Hulu. It is on Amazon Prime. And so I don't know if it has commercials in it. I was able to see a screener of it, but it's fantastic. You can watch it straight through. I don't think so. No, if you pay for Prime, you probably get an ad-free version of the movie.
Football's now on Prime, and they have commercials.
They build in their commercials.
Yeah, but that's like it's built in. The TV timeouts and everything. That's part of the entertainment of that.
But this film is called Totally Killer. I will give you the premise. It's part of the trailer. It's essentially a cross of John Carpenter's Halloween and Back to the Future, where a teenage girl goes back in time to 1987 and has to help her high school mom stop a serial killer who is about to unleash on their town. And Gabe and I were talking about a bit that it has that sort of Happy Death Day vibe to it. It's got a little bit like Freaky, the Vince Vaughn one where he swaps places with Catherine Newton. It's just really fun and clever. And Nahnatchka is a very clever director who comes from TV and sitcom work and comedy and applies a lot of those skills to horror. And from the minute that I saw this movie on a screener, I knew that I really personally wanted to get her on the show. It's so terrific. So we'll talk about it on the other side. Yeah, we'll talk about it on the other side. But in the meantime, go watch Totally Killer and listen to our interview with Nahnatchka Khan on behalf of her brand new movie.
Seriously, we both love the film. Sean sent me a text message after he saw it that basically said, dude, this is your kind of film. This is very much your jam. So seriously, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Truly. I'm so happy when I get licensed to nerd out.
Yes. You have a lifelong license to nerd out. I'm going to start us off. I want to talk about, I guess, those of us who were lucky enough to grow up on the VHS slasher movies of the 80s and the whole experience of going to the video store. I always say, you know, like kids today, they'll never know the anxiety of running into a video store hoping that the video is there, or going into the bin where like the return videos used to go and like digging through to see if the movie was there. I was just wondering if you could just talk to me about your experience of going to the video store as a kid, and how much that experience, which is kind of extinct now, maybe shaped who you are as a filmmaker today.
Absolutely. I think that, I mean, even you telling that story just like brings me back to that time, you know, and like begging your parents to take you as soon as you got out of school. Like for us, it was Fridays and they're all busy or people are working or whatever. But you're like, if we don't go right now, we're not going to get, you know, Back to the Future or whatever. Like it's going to be rented. We're not gonna be able to see it. And so then convincing somebody to take you, running into the store and like seeing the picture, but then having to make sure, because that's, you know, that's a psych out, because there's like the tapes aren't behind it. It's already been rented. Then having to run to the counter and be like, can I check the return bin? Or have you restocked the shelves? And they're either like, get out of here, kid, or they're like, no, we haven't, you know, it depends if they're cool or not. But yeah, I mean, that was like a real, it was like a land grab, you know, you were just like fighting for your life out there. And it like made her, you know, like you either had a good weekend or a bad weekend, depending on what you were able
100%, 100%. And isn't it a bummer that like kids today, like you just press play. It's just there. It's always there if you want it. And like, it's not fair.
I know. Same thing with music though, right? Like, now we all just go on Spotify. We could listen to whatever you want. It's great to have the access. Like, I'm not going to lie, but going, you know, to the record stores and like finding the thing that you want. I don't know, like all of that is
record. You remember the packaging for a CD was like a giant plastic sleeve that just had the CD at the top. What a waste.
Good thing, by the way. Otherwise I would have stolen so many. Like, I feel like that was to prevent me from shoplifting. Like, that whole thing.
All right, I'm going to build off of the idea of CDs because I love the fact that your film uses actual 80s songs and not like 80s inspired riffs, you know, with some synthesizer. Because my wife and I were watching it on the screener, and whenever a new one came up, whether it was like Venus or some such thing, she kind of chuckled to herself because it really set the tone. And there are these 80s songs that like you hear Cruel Summer and you think of Karate Kid kind of thing. But we know how, and speaking with filmmakers, how difficult it can be to get the licensing to be able to use those songs. Was it an uphill battle for you to get the songs that you wanted?
Yeah, you know, it's always about music. I've never had an experience where you're like, oh, we have money left over in music, or like, you know what, they budgeted too much money for music. It's like, that's never the case, you know, because it's so important, and it's important in, you know, every project specifically, but in this one, to set the tone. I mean, as soon as she lands in the 80s, it has to be an iconic song. It has to be something recognizable, as you say, like. It can't be like inspired by or a riff or something. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's a constant fight to just get more. And look, like I would have had 10 more if I could have, you know, but I think being able, you know, having a cap on that is also good, because it doesn't then become just like the series of like, oh, that was a great song. But yeah, it's quite important for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I want to talk about the characters just straight up name dropping and addressing Back to the Future. And I guess what I want to ask about is like, one, when you're dealing with time travel, is it better to just go ahead and get it like, yes, let's just go ahead and discuss Back to the Future because it's the best that's ever been done. And then also, what is that balance of characters in movies talking about other movies? Like, how far can you push that before it becomes almost like winking at the camera?
Totally. Yeah, that was a really important line for us to walk. So it doesn't feel like, you know, any character could turn and wink, as you say. But I think for us, like the idea of Totally Killer, where this Gen Z woman goes back, you know, this 2023 person goes back in time to 87, armed with all of our reference points. So she's got all of our, you know, all the entertainment that she's consumed to be able to like talk about this time travel thing. And the idea would just be like if we all went back in time, how would you try to convince somebody that that's what happened without sounding crazy? And it's like, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't have like a chalkboard scene moment where I'm like breaking that down. But I would say, have you seen Back to the Future? You know, have you seen that? So it's like using that as our currency, I guess. just kind of made sense for her to try to get people on board.
I like that we're savvy enough as an audience too, that you could suggest that things that she's doing in the past is changing, instantaneously changing things in the present day. And we've all seen enough to know that, like, oh yeah, that's kind of how it would happen, but nobody knows.
That's right. Nobody knows. It's like now, we now know such thing as like the multiverse and all that sort of thing, right? But like, so it's like time is existing on multiple planes all at once or whatever. So in this like one timeline, if she's going back, I like that we were able to cut back to 2023 and sort of see the effects of that in real time in our movie as well.
Absolutely.
It just made me realize how much facts we know through movies. Like, oh, like if you stand in front of a T-Rex, don't move and it can't see you, which I don't think is true at all. I think like they made that up, but like how many things we think we know just because we saw them in a movie that one time.
For sure. We're all dinosaur experts because of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nahnatchka, one of the things that I'm using this junket essentially as a way to ask questions about 80s horror movies that I just love and never got a chance to question. And I'm assuming you absorbed a lot of them as you went through this. And one of the things I think people think about 80s horror films is that they assume they're not well made, that they sort of just churn these out specifically to make a bunch of sequels to franchises. But I want to ask if you think that that's a misconception, and if there's a franchise in particular from the 80s that you do think really pushed the envelope as you were, maybe borrowing a few different things to work into this.
I think it's definitely a misconception. And I think that you can tell by the longevity of those movies and how popular they remain, and I think like not even just every Halloween, but the franchises they've launched, there's something about them that even present day keeps us engaged, and not just us, but wanting to show, kids or your nieces or your nephews, and wanting to expose them to something that just like hits all the right notes. And I think it's the idea of, I think as a society, we've always been obsessed with killers. Mm-hmm. We are currently obsessed with like psychopaths and killers and people who operate outside of the confines of the norm. And then what those filmmakers did back in the 70s and 80s, just kind of gave a new spin on, so it's not maybe Ted Bundy or whatever, but it's Michael Myers, and you give him this backstory and you put a mask on him and he can't be killed and he keeps coming and he doesn't stop. And it's like, I guess it's that like kind of bridging of reality versus fantasy and, taking it into a heightened place. And, the Friday the 13th franchise being another one, and that sort of misleading. We talked about, the first iteration of the Friday franchise being different from the ones after that. But yeah, I think it's that idea of crossover from reality to fantasy, and just there's something satisfying, and you want this guy to die, but you also are like, oh my God, like all the kills are so gruesome. They're done amazingly well. There's camera work in those movies that have been, borrowed and stolen and taken into other genres since, and a lot of it is, they didn't have a ton of money for, like, I'm thinking of that first Evil Dead that, the Sam Raimi shot with like a flying through the thing. And it's like, that's, he figured that out. And like how many movies have, it's really impressive.
Absolutely. Yeah, true.
Sean, I told a story earlier, and it seriously made my girlfriend Adrienne look at me like, what is wrong? We were at a Spirit Halloween, and there was she was like, oh, do you want that poster? Because she knows how much I love Friday the 13th, but it was a Friday the 13th poster with Jason in the hockey mask. And I was like, no, because that's wrong. And she was like, what are you talking about? I was like,
oh,
Jason.
It was from the first movie?
Yeah. It was the first, like, it was the logo from the first movie, but it was Jason in the hockey mask. I was like, he's not full grown in part one.
That's just dumb.
And he doesn't get a hockey mask till part 3. And she was like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, what? Like, only you would comment. Yeah. So I kind of
went to everybody there and was been like, does anybody care about the dots?
And also they used an image of Freddy from Freddy's Dead, but like but with the original Nightmare on Elm Street logo. And I was like, that makes me want to claw my face off. No pun intended. Yeah, it really was. It really was. I kind of want to swing back to the 80s because, talking about my girlfriend. My girlfriend has an 8-year-old daughter, and sometimes I will say things where she'll look at me and be like, what the hell are you talking about? I think the other day I referenced like having to rewind a movie, and she was like, I don't know what that means. I don't know, So I'm sort of curious. A lot of the cast members obviously were not alive in the 80s. Was there anything about that decade that you kind of had to sit down and be like, okay, well, in the 80s, we had to do this?
I mean, definitely the technology. I would say it was like that sort of vibe. Initially, I came in like with all these like reference movies, like all these horror movies or whatever. And not only had they seen them all, but they then started like pitching other ones back to me. They were like, have you seen?
Love that.
Like, okay. So like flip that, tables turned. I was like, I left with homework, which was
love
great.
that.
I mean, I'm telling you, this Gen Z, like all these kids, like they know so much. They have access to so much. But the technology was definitely, I remember talking about Walkmans with one of the cast members and them being like, yeah. And they pulled up a picture of a Discman. And I was like, no. That's like that's like Walkman 2.0. Like everybody, was excited for the Discman because it was not the Walkman. But yeah, so I think technology was a real kind of one we had to kind of figure out on some level.
It's a really funny sequence where they hand the bloody rag over to the police and they're like, this has his DNA.
Yes.
It's like not that long ago. And all of a sudden you're like, why can't you just process this?
I know. And like, also like if you had to describe, like, again, it's like if somebody asked me like, what is DNA? I'd be like, it's a, we all like, it's only I have mine and you have your whatever. And there's a system and we're all entered into the
right. Just run it.
Just run the DNA samples.
So Vernon, I'm going to assume is a nod to Principal Vernon from the Breakfast Club, and the leather tasseled jacket I've learned is Sloane's, modeled after Sloane Peterson from Ferris Bueller. But I'm curious, what's the most obscure 80s movie reference that you worked in that you think you'd have to be like a diehard to even pick up on it?
Oh my gosh. I mean, they're just the most obscure one. I don't know. I mean, the Vernon one is pretty obscure. We had a joke from one of the characters about like the first microchip ever invented, and that was like there's a little Repo Man reference in the design of that.
Nice.
So I don't even know if you're going to be able to see it, but I don't know. Maybe if you enhance.
I'll take that one. That's pretty cool.
I've got to tell you, Sean just corrected me. He and I were talking before the interview, and I referenced the Max Headroom mask, and he goes, "No, that's not Max Headroom." And I was like, "Wait, really? I thought that was." So can you tell me the design of the mask? And it's not Max Headroom.
No. So it's the idea for the mask was, wanting something that obviously originated in the 80s, but then in our movie, people still dress up as the killer today. So wanting it to feel relevant still and also nostalgic. And so we decided on the idea of like a handsome man being terrifying. And so we started to pull. So Tony Gardner and Alterian, who are the mask design company, started pulling 80s heartthrob references. And so they pulled Dolph Lundgren. We pulled Kiefer Sutherland. We pulled Rob Lowe. Pulled a little Johnny Bravo in there. There's a little like a lot of different little pieces, and then we got like the Lost Boys earring. A little nod to the little lightning bolt, and yeah, just kind of an amalgam of like a bunch of reference points there.
Love that.
Now, have you heard the Max Headroom comparison though?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, I think that was the two comparisons or whatever, the two references that were not humans were like Max Headroom and Johnny Bravo.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of Billy Zabka in there too. I can kind of spot.
Oh, that's a good call.
But the Dolph Lundgren is without a doubt what's going on to there. I want to talk a bit about editing for horror versus editing for comedy, and how, a lot of times you're going after the punchline beat, versus the obvious scare. And I don't think what I love about Totally Killer is that it doesn't have those cheap jump scares. It has these things that sort of get you out of left field, where you're not really expecting them to come. And I think that comes from the editing process. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. Yeah, for sure. And I think, what I found in the edit, and Jeremy Cohen, who is our editor, is amazing. And, coming from a comedy background, you have those comedy rhythms that are set up and pay off, and then bringing this sort of genre stuff in and not wanting to go for the cheap scare. The cheap scare to me is on a comedy edit rhythm. And the actual scares, the thing that makes you actually jump and come out of left field, is when you off rhythm edit. So what's great about a genre mashup is you have the rhythmic comedy setup and payoff, and you're going along. You're like, oh, this is funny, and Randall Park, yeah, DNA, and then suddenly, once you change the editing pace, we can sort of start to surprise you. So like where you think the scare would come, it doesn't come. It either comes before that or after that, and it just keeps you kind of off balance.
And then, so Nahnatchka, how important was it to be able to screen in front of like an audience at Fantastic Fest to get a sense of how those beats hit? So
huge, especially at a place like Fantastic Fest, because they're, so well versed in the genre, Sure. They have so many great reference points. And then to just watch it, with the audience who had never seen it, any part of it, they're not involved in it. They're just purely there to experience this movie. And it was so satisfying to see.
So I have a bit of a chicken or the egg follow-up. Whenever you have a movie that kind of has a little bit of horror, a little bit of comedy, do you start with a comedy and make it scary, or do you start with a horror film and make it funny?
For this, I started with the comedy for sure.
Oh, interesting.
I wanted you, just because the way the movie unfolds, because we also have time travel as well, so it's horror, comedy, time travel. And so I wanted to invite you into this world where anything can be possible, I think. And so I wanted to almost lull you in a little bit to be like, okay, like it's, some mother-daughter, she's just kind of rude to her mom, whatever. So then when the first fight, the big sequence happens at the beginning of the movie that kind of launches us, it kind of takes you by surprise, as opposed to starting moody and dark and something menacing is coming and you're just waiting for when. I just wanted that to feel like a kind of hard left. And so kind of bringing you into a lighter world, taking a hard left, and then also the idea of anything being possible, because then we also have to introduce time travel. So it's like, okay, then that is something that can exist and happen in our world as well,
This movie should not work as well as it does. Like, I feel like when you say these things, like if I hadn't seen the movie and heard that answer, I'd be like, what the hell movie is this? But it really does work. I guess I want to ask, without getting into spoilers, Robert Englund once told me that when he played Freddy, he kind of purposely kept his distance from the kids. Kane Hodder told me the same thing when he played Jason. Bill Skarsgård with It. I'm just sort of curious about the actor who plays the mass killer, because I know oftentimes it's not the actual person who's the killer in the film. Is there a distance between the two, or are they all kind of hanging out at lunch?
I think, the way we approach it here is sort of taking that actor aside and just running through the script in terms of like the killer's mindset. Mm-hmm. So even, whatever scenes this person is in, like, where are you emotionally, and how much of it do we show? How much of it do we, keep to ourselves? Because I think part of it is not knowing who it is, so there's not like an instant, oh my God, it's this person, sure. So there should be a familiarity. It should seem like a friendly thing, but then there's this undercurrent of like hatred, underneath.
Does the person who actually ends up being the killer, is that person ever behind the mask in any of the like sequences throughout the film?
No. So the actor is not. We have a stunt performer who's the actual, like in the big fight kill scene.
Oh, that's sure. Pretty cool. That's pretty cool. All right. I want to ask a non-spoilery, and then I'm going to slip in a spoiler question, which we will hold until the very end, but I can't not pick your brain on it. I've been lucky enough to see the film twice. The second time through, it really hit me how good Olivia Holt does Julie Bowen. Is that something that you really coached her on? Did she kind of just pick up on that? It's mannerisms and vocal patterns that I think she nails.
It's her. I mean, it's Olivia, she had that in like day one on set, and we cast Olivia first. Mm. So, Julie was cast after her. So once Olivia found out it was Julie, that's what I mean about like them coming for, like me thinking I got to come in and be like, okay, here's some reference on, like she came down, like she knew what she was going to do. And she did it in a way that, again, like I'm glad you said on the second watch, because it's not in the forefront of the performance, but when you get to go back, there's a lot happening in this movie, as we've said, there's a lot of things at play. But then when you get to go back and kind of rewatch and you're like the subtleties of the performance, I think it's just a testament to her. I mean, she just killed it.
Yeah, when she's flirting with the boyfriend in the cabin, and talking about making pizza for him, I was like, God, she's doing like a dead-on impersonation of Julie Bowen at that point. We want to thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, this is a ton of fun to break down. Obviously, the worst thing you could ask somebody is, when you're going to make another one of these, but please make another one of these. It's just such a fun concept.
Thank you so much. It was so fun to talk to you guys. Truly, honestly, I really enjoyed it.
We want to thank Nahnatchka for joining the show, obviously, and our good friends at Amazon Prime who have given us the opportunity to talk about Totally Killer. I want to remind you guys that movie is available right now. Like you can literally, at the end of our show, hop on over to Amazon Prime.
But at the end of it, only at the end.
Pull it up. Yeah, listen to the rest of our show. Or at least put us on in the background and just pull the volume down if you want to.
Put a commercial in between and then...
right, break it up that way. So, I want to tell you guys a bit about Totally Killer, but I don't want to give away a lot of its surprises. Right. I'm going to name a bunch of movies that it reminded me of, and yet it's still very fresh and familiar. Happy Death Day is definitely one of them. Freaky, I mentioned. It has a bit of Scream quality to it, but it's one of these films that name checks all these movies in them. Like the teenage girl who gets sent back in time. And it also is one of these movies that, like, right off the bat, it's like someone makes a joke of like time travel movies never make any sense. So you don't get bogged down in the science of it. They're basically just like, hey, we invented this time machine. It's going to send this girl back to into the 1980s. And then we're going to poke fun at the 1980s and slasher films from that era. But like,
which is a great premise. Like, it's a great premise. Yeah.
To the point where I'm really shocked that no one has done it to this point. And like the girl uses Back to the Future as a reference point. Like when she's quickly trying to explain to the cops of like, hey, I know that there's a serial killer that's going to strike tonight. And they're like, how do you know this? And she's like, have you guys seen Back to the Future? And they're like, yeah, of course. Cause it's 1987 and that came out in 85. She's like, I'm essentially Marty McFly right now. And I'm trying to stop this serial killer. They introduce a new killer who, if you listen to the interview now at this point, you know that the mask is not supposed to be Max Headroom, even though a lot of people on online are sort of referencing that. It's more just a handsome 80s figure, a mix of like Kiefer Sutherland and Dolph Lundgren, although I thought it really had a Max Headroom look to it. And it's just, I think it delivers, and Gabe, you got a chance to see it also. I thought it delivered really big on the comedy, but also on the horror slasher elements. So
I want to mention, I will comment on that, but on the mask, what's funny or ironic is the mask reminds me of Christopher Landon, who is the director of Happy Death Day.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like he doesn't necessarily have like slicked back blonde hair, but it just kind of looks like a caricature mask of him. And I was like, that's really like a funny coincidence. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the humor was really great. I like the comedy in a horror can be great, or it can be like, it can be muddled where you're like, you don't really do the horror well and you don't really do the comedy well. So it's like, what are we doing? But I felt that the references were like really hit home, and they weren't cheap. Like it felt, as you were saying, like she's using them to push the plot forward and to interact with characters. And it's not just like a throwaway, like, hey, you remember that movie or, that thing?
Right.
Which was really good. But the horror is really great. Like it's violent. And I think that I wasn't expecting that with the way that it started and like the kind of tone and it feels this sounds like it feels like someone who's comes from TV, like the way that some of the shots work and everything. And I don't mean that as a negative. It just has that sort of digital kind of glossy feel look. And then it gets kind of really, beyond TVMA. And I thought that was really fun.
I thought the running joke throughout it of the main girl's name is Kiernan Shipka. And I don't really know her from anything. Is she known for a big popular thing?
I interviewed her for the Chronicles of Sabrina. It was like the
Sabrina, that was her big. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I think.
Sabrina, yeah. And it was a Netflix show, yeah. And she's probably most known, Yeah, she's been in a bunch of different things, but that particularly was the big one. I think. Yeah, that was the big one.
She was she was in Mad Men. I think she was like the kid or whatever in Mad Men. Yeah.
When she goes back to the 1980s, obviously she finds almost everything really troublesome.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed, Gabe, but like everyone smokes. Like she gets a ride from a lady driving a station wagon with her kids in the back. And when she steps out the door, this big billow of smoke comes out. And the lady's like, thanks a lot. Drives away. And you see the two kids in the back seat of the car just inhaling all this secondhand smoke. I don't think it was that bad in the 80s, but it's very possible that's more of a 70s thing.
It handles it in a way that is like honest, but also I think having fun with it, pointing it out without it doesn't reach a thing of like how terrible were the 80s. It's just like, hey, while we're here, let's have fun with just how different the world is. And I thought was fun.
I want to give credit to Olivia Holt, who is known for Cruel Summer, I know, and she's been an actress in a couple of different things. She plays the younger version of Julie Bowen, who people would know from Modern Family, and does this, as I kind of mentioned in the interview, like this spot on Julie Bowen impersonation as she's doing it. Really clever use of the casting of adults and then the kids who play them in the 80s. It's great. I mean, it's really, really fun. If you're looking for something that's new and different and still delivers on October scares, as everyone's sort of dialing into horror right now, I highly, highly recommend Totally Killer, which is available on Amazon Prime, as I mentioned right now.
I think it's a perfect kind of October movie. Like, especially if you like to watch a lot of creepy horror stuff, it's like a good break from the super dreadful while still feeling like you're in the season, which I think is always fun.
Without a question.
I saw Saw X like right after we did the show last week. Speaking of like horror that's like hits you on a different level.
You need a break.
I actually thought it was the best since the original, but when I got out of that film, because I had watched The Exorcist that same day, The Exorcist Believer.
Oh wow!
So which is my day. I just went to bed with dark thoughts that night. It was like really, but
Saw, gotta watch some puppy videos or something before you go to bed.
Well, like Totally Killer just sounds like it's in the genre, but it knows how to have fun. And I think, you know, that's kind of more my speed. As much as I respect and understand the filmmaking that went into Saw X, and it's really actually really well made, and Tobin Bell's really fantastic in the role. It's just so disturbing and brutal. And I'm 39. I just look away, man. I don't want to see someone cutting their head off. I mean, I just can't. I can't do that stuff anymore. But yeah, anyway, so I just hearing what you said about Totally Killer, it just sounds like the polar opposite of Saw X, and they're both like obviously horror films, just in terms of tone. So.
All right, so I want to get into a Loki season 2 preview. This feels like the type of show, and I will say right off the bat that I really, really enjoyed the 4 episodes that I watched, but it does not hold anyone's hand if you're not up to speed on the MCU. And if you're not up to speed specifically, like, I mean, I would advise anyone who's hasn't press played on episode 1 yet, which is available on Disney Plus right now, to go back and rewatch, you know, maybe the last 2 episodes of Loki, because everything that's happening in the TVA, this time variance authority that gosh, it's even trying to describe it is very confusing. Like,
I remember loving the ending of season 1, but I don't remember. I mean,
but that's a good thing though, right? Like, that was our biggest issue was, are they going to have to start over with everything so that people can enjoy it? We kind of want them to be like, hey, you're along for the ride. This is for you.
Yeah, for sure. It's just interesting that, like, I agree with what Kevin is saying, that when the Infinity Saga was playing out, there was this anticipation for every new film that came. And I feel like with these new phases, there is still that component of you have to watch it if you want to be up to speed on what's happening. But I feel like casual fan, and Kevin I'd qualify as, isn't dialed into, you know, the intricacies of everything that's happening. But that, and so I got to thinking about like a show like Star Trek, and back when it was in its prime, you know, although I guess people would say Star Trek now is very, very popular.
It's in a great place, yeah.
But it's still just a show that was there for the fans, you know, and it feels like Marvel and Star Wars, when they kind of came back or became their big thing, they were an event, and now they're just kind of shows. They're shows that come around every once in a while, and they're there for the audience that wants to dial into them. And I think Loki, I'll say this about it, compared to some of the most recent MCU shows and even the movies like Ant-Man and Doctor Strange, which had limitations because of filming during COVID, or, you know, having to rely heavily on a lot of green screen because of protocols and things like that. The production values and the sets and the production design and everything that goes into the designing of the TVA is all top notch. Like, it feels like if Marvel truly pumped their brakes, you know, to start to say like, hey, we're not going to rush everything out. We don't have to have 3 movies a year. We're going to up the quality a little bit. And this is the first step toward that. It's a great step because it looks fantastic. I'm sure by now people have read and heard that Ke Kwan is an addition as a key character to the, that was really awful. I'm sorry about that. But he's unintended. Key is a key character, which I will not tell anybody about because I want you to sort of discover it for yourself. The way he plays that character is fantastic. I continue to love the chemistry between Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston. I think they have a really great rapport back and forth. And I'm super into the TVA nonsense. Like I'm into that mythos, and I want to figure out the multiverse, and I want to learn more about time and its issue as they get into Kang. So highly recommend, but I think it's really going to work much better for people who are still on board the MCU train and don't just want to put something on as brainless in the background.
How many episodes is this season in total going to be? Is it
6
total? So you've seen the first 2 acts, so to speak, of it. You've seen quite a bit of it.
Yeah, I have.
Okay. And you're confident about, you feel like it's set up to stick a good landing?
Yes. I will say at the end of episode 4, I screamed at what happened. And because I realized I was not going to get to see what continued for another month and a half.
That's good.
Which is frustrating.
I feel like a lot of the shows, especially early on, we kind of got in this rhythm where we would see the first few episodes, the first 4 episodes, and we'd go, we'd come up with all these theories about how it could be really great. And then it wouldn't be that. And then we would be like, it kind of was just this. And I feel like there were like 3 or 4 times in a row where we were kind of like, it could be this. Yeah. Without knowing, because the show was kind of we didn't know where they were taking it. Mm-hmm. And then it was sort of fell flat. So it's good to hear that this feels like it's got a natural build. And Loki season 1 was great. So I'm confident in that.
I agree. But this goes back to what I was saying about Infinity War. I mean, Loki's death in Infinity War is an incredible sequence. And it's really the thing that propels Hemsworth and Thor onto, you know, what in that mission, and the full circle moment of entering Wakanda with the wrath of wanting to kill this Thanos because of what happened to Loki. Like, I just, again, I understand the multiverse. I understand that characters live and die and they come back. It just feels, it cheapens it for me. I think the Loki death in Infinity War was so impactful, and it just, when I watched it again, I was like, yeah, where are we now? It just it just seems different to me. I don't know. It doesn't feel the same anymore. And again, I know that all good things come to an end at some point.
I feel like I've said this on the show before.
I've probably said that before too, I'm assuming. But
yeah. Well, I feel like I've said this on the show before, but I mean, think about how we describe movies. We describe them in decades. We're like, this feels like a 70s movie. Yeah. This feels like a 60s movie. This feels like an 80s movie. Like, it's not totally unheard of if we're just going to take historical, you know, sort of data and say like, wow, they were the top of the film industry for a decade. If they weren't anymore and they don't come back to that, I don't think, like, you know, 20 years from now, we'd look back and go like, yeah, it's crazy they couldn't sustain that. They'd be like, it's just another decade that was dominated by one genre or one type of thing.
But that's quality and quantity.
They're still making, you know, a lot of money. But
10 years is kind of that stretch, you know? It almost feels like each of these genres. Remember when it was found footage for the longest time?
Yeah.
Like every type of horror that came out had to be that riff.
You're right.
You get about 10 years on it, and then everyone's ready for the next thing.
Right, because the Infinity Saga was about 10 years, right? Essentially.
About maybe 11. Yeah.
And even like, I don't see, because there's 2 Avengers movies on the horizon, I don't see either of them reaching the height of public anticipation that those other movies had.
I'm more excited about Deadpool 3 than I am anything else. Sure, because it's unique, and it's going to be R-rated, and it's going to be, and again, we haven't seen anything of it yet. Obviously, we know that they filmed and they had to stop with the strike. But that is
we know
interesting.
Jackman comes back, but that's another one. Like, Logan was a send off to that
True.
character, and now he's back. So,
and that actually literally goes against what I just said about Loki, and you're not.
But
wrong.
Deadpool is different. Deadpool plays by different rules.
It's meta. It's and
he's gonna make fun of that. Like most likely, they're gonna be like, "Oh yeah, sorry." You like.
I still love that Deadpool 2 opens with him winding up the toy of Logan on the stage. But really funny.
That sounds exciting. I'm more excited about Deadpool 3 than any Avengers movie coming out because it's gonna be R. It's going to be different. It's a new character entering this world. I mean, obviously the character already existed at Fox, but that to me is intriguing. That makes me go, oh, I can't wait for that.
And we just don't know what to expect.
Deal.
It's like anything. With everything else, we feel like we know what we're going to get. I'm excited for, and again, I didn't mean to imply that the superhero genre is dead. We're never going to see it's still going to make a lot of money for a long time. They still make Westerns. Yeah.
But I can't tell you how unexcited I am for Aquaman 2. I saw the trailer for it the other day. I'm just like, what?
Well, I was going to say, like,
see that.
Yeah. I mean, the first one was awful, but it's a long road. But to that point, I'm very excited for Superman. I'm very excited for James Gunn's vision. Do I know enough about anything to know if it's going to be good?
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Is this their 15th at bat? Maybe, but I really like James Gunn. I really, if he's going to come to the table and say like, this is one of the most important things I've done for me, which I feel like he's said, like he's really excited about what he has to say using the character. I'm very excited for what that could be.
Yeah. And the genre is not dead. Like Matt Reeves, I want to see Matt Reeves as Batman 2 tomorrow.
Of course.
How funny would it be? How funny would it be if the decade switch is now DC gets its decade? Like
it's very possible.
It feels like it. I mean, I know that obviously the Flash and all of that has not been great, but between the Batman and between what the potential of James Gunn has, it feels like they could ride that wave for a while.
And also superhero films, and it's interesting because I know that I'm coming off a bit more negative in terms of where I am with the genre right now, and that's just pretty much fatigue.
I think that's kind of where most people are.
Yeah, but I'm also somebody who has a deep appreciation for that 10-year period of time that we had. That was a really cool moment for cinema. It was like one of the most intriguing and exciting. Endgame might be the most anticipated film that I remember walking into in my lifetime. I mean, obviously, aside from my love for Nolan and seeing what movies come out, but when you spend that much time with characters and that much time building 20 plus films, and then you're going to hit an end point, it's really remarkable what they pulled off. And I think the problem with today's society is it's always, what do you have for me now? And then right now we're in a fatigue part. So you kind of forget how incredible that 10 years really was. And I think that when I watched Infinity War the other day, it was like, man, I just miss that feeling. I miss that honest, that emotion.
It is funny. I thought this the last time I started to rewatch the MCU films, because it doesn't feel like that long ago, and I'm nearly 30, so I'm getting to an age where like nostalgia is starting to become a real thing for me. I have nostalgia from when I was like a kid, but I know. I'm sorry, Sean.
No, but Sean and I know. I turned 40 next year, man.
I know,
like,
but I'm saying for me, I'm having the experience of like I was basically an adult when I saw that. Oh, that's weird for me to say it, like have a nostalgic thing from when I wasn't necessarily just a kid. And rewatching the early MCU films, or really any of that first saga. It's funny how much enjoyment I get out of, or it's amusing to me how much enjoyment I get out of just living in like remember those days? Like that nostalgic little feeling. It feels like it happened so fast.
One of my favorite ReelBlend moments ever, I know then we'll move on, was Sean and I sitting down with the Russo brothers the Monday after Endgame opened.
Yeah, that was great.
And Sean had come up to DC because I was doing a Q&A with Joe and Anthony at Lockheed Martin IMAX here in DC, and it was an amazing crowd. Lots of ReelBlend listeners were there. But Sean, I mean, like that morning, because that movie had just come out, no one had seen it until the premiere, and it was riding this massive high from over the weekend. And Sean and I are just sitting in this green room with the two filmmakers who were involved. It was so. Sean and I were like exhilarated.
We got the first spoiler interview with them.
Yeah.
Because you can go back and listen to it. They say like, it's so weird to be able to talk about these details, because we talked about Robert Downey Jr. filming the reshoot of him snapping his fingers on the same stage where he auditioned for Iron Man, like that full circle moment. And, you know, shit like that just gives you such goosebumps of like what they were able to accomplish. So
go back and listen to that interview if you get a chance. Cause like that to me, and I kind of want to listen to it. I don't go back and listen to a lot of my own stuff, but like that to me is a time capsulation of the energy of what that moment was like. Mm-hmm. Like I bet you if you listen to that interview, Sean and I are probably like geeking out, like our voices are probably like super high pitched. We're like, oh my god, because I mean they were telling us stuff that no one had heard yet, and no one had. We were talking about like how they entered New York and how they refilmed those sequences. It was wild, man.
Yeah, it was very fun. All right, well, nostalgia is still a thing at the Hollywood box office, and the studios are still trying to capitalize on what was old and make it new again, and that's how we get to The Exorcist Believer, which Kevin got a chance to see. And Kev, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The reviews dropped earlier this week and they were not good. And one of the things that I saw in a lot of the reviews was that Ellen Burstyn is like severely misused in this. So I just want to get your impression of, did you like it more than the general consensus? And did you think that it was worth it to bring Burstyn back for this?
Yeah, so I have a mixed bag reaction to this. I don't think it's as bad as the reviews are saying it is, but it's definitely not great, and it's definitely not even good. But it does have some promise to it that I want to give David Gordon Green credit for. First of all, his filmmaking career has been really fascinating to me. I was looking at his filmography. Obviously, you do Pineapple Express, you do Your Highness, you do. He did Eastbound and Down episodes. And one of the movies that he did that I thought was great was Stronger. He did Stronger, which was great with Jake Gyllenhaal.
I love that movie.
Yeah. And then he dived into these Halloween films, right? He did all three of them. And I've said this in the show before. I think the first Halloween movie that he made would have been the most perfect bookend ever. It was called Halloween. Yep. You bring the three generations of Strodes, you kill Michael Myers, and then you're done. Halloween, the middle one and the third one were two of the worst movies I've seen in a long time. They were awful. And I just genuinely found that to be a business decision that obviously made money, but the storytelling wise, it just didn't work. So now we're back with David Gordon Green with The Exorcist Believer. And the idea of bringing Ellen Burstyn back is obviously very intriguing. I still have nightmares about her performance in Requiem for a Dream. She's really an amazing actor and obviously great in the first Exorcist, the William Friedkin film. This movie has a really strong first half. I actually thought it built character really well. This is not really that scary of a film. I found it a lot more psychological. I kind of wanted more horror and scares, especially from an Exorcist film, because the first one is arguably next to The Shining, the scariest movie ever made. And still today, I mean, the practical effects in that film and the performances and everybody in that movie is incredible. This is definitely a step up from the last two Halloween films he directed, for sure. The filmmaking is really solid. It's shot well. I think that the movie has promise, but the third act I just thought was really bad. Like the movie didn't know where it wanted to go. It just felt too easy. It didn't feel natural. It just felt like they were plugging pieces into a puzzle. Ellen Burstyn, I agree. She has one scene that is genuinely terrifying that I do think was a really well-made scene. It's pretty shocking. But overall, I just think they rushed that. There was something there. And when you watch a movie sometimes and there's something there that could have been good had they edited it a certain way or shot it a certain way or wrote it better. The idea, the seed, like it sounded like it was a good idea, and then the execution's not great. One thing I do want to point out, and this is super nerdy, but I do find this really cool, and this is kind of subconscious, but I think it's interesting. David Gordon Green's really interesting about details. If you look at the first Halloween film, Carpenter's film, I bring up aspect ratio a lot, but there's a point to this. That film was shot in 2:3:9. So it's more of like a wider aspect ratio. The 1:8:5 is more of a tall. So when David Gordon Green did his 3 Halloween films, he kept Carpenter's original aspect ratio throughout, which is a really cool choice. It keeps the world, it's the world you're in, and it's not too much of a jarring. Not many people would notice it, but it is psychologically and subconsciously something that you think of, because if you ever watch the first Halloween, which everyone has, that looks a certain way because it's 239. So when you watch his new ones, it kind of feels like you're in the same world. He did the same thing for The Exorcist. I thought that was really cool. Like Friedkin shot 185, which is in the more taller ratio. And he continued that ratio here with Believer, which I thought was a really cool thing. And then they obviously, he brought in two composers. They do still work with the theme, which is really cool, but they play it in their own way. So it's a frustrating review because I found the filmmaking interesting. I just didn't find the film overall. I walked out, went, how did they just? It was basically like they were carrying the ball on a punt return, and they were going towards to get a touchdown, and then they just fumbled the ball at like the 10-yard line or something like that. It just felt like it just missed a beat. It wasn't that scary. It wasn't that scary.
I don't think that bringing Ellen Burstyn back has the same punch as you bringing back Jamie Lee Curtis for a Halloween film.
It doesn't, and it feels forced.
Don't you guys feel like the Exorcist franchise is a little muddled because the exorcism films that are not the Exorcist franchise, like exorcism films is like its own genre.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, of course, you're playing to the horror audience, which is
just had the Pope's Exorcist.
Yeah.
Most recently.
It's a huge part of horror storytelling.
I just wonder what the sort of, this is a boring word, but like brand recognition, franchise recognition that people are going to come in with even versus a Halloween with a mask and all that thing versus like, oh, it's just one of those exorcism movies.
Right. So what's interesting is as we're talking, I'll give credit to Discussing Film on Twitter for this. The film is tracking with a $30+ million domestic opening. Now, the film, obviously, Jason Blum works for cheap, always has made lower budget films, but this movie actually cost, according to this, $30 million. But an article I sent you guys before the show started was that I'm going to read this directly. The film cost $30 million to make, and they bought the rights to make a trilogy for $400 million. That's from Discussing Film. So that's a lot of money to spend for the rights.
So you're probably looking at, after the production of 3 films, over $500 million before marketing.
Holy God! You better connect.
The rights themselves were $400 million according to this, but so they'll make their production budget back for sure.
But when you're balancing the books, like you still pay. Now you guys want to know why the next one's going to make $1 billion though.
Why?
Max von Sydow is coming back?
No, because the sequel to The Exorcist Believer is called, apparently, The Exorcist Deceiver.
Are you joking or being serious?
That's what I'm seeing on IMDb. And I'm assuming the trilogy is going to be The Exorcist Receiver, and it's about a football player that gets a demon.
Kev just used a football analogy to...
Did you? Oh, yeah.
To sell the movie.
Yeah.
Kev, does it, without giving anything away, does it tease where the story's going?
When the film ended, I did not feel any particular push towards a continued story that I'm particularly interested in. Yeah, it seemed like it ended on such a note that could move, but it wasn't.
Is it set up to be like not an anthology, but kind of like it's going to be a new story, but just with like one character in a different setting?
I'm assuming. So for people who are I haven't seen the trailers for this, the reason why this one's a little more unique is it's 2 young girls who have been possessed, and basically the parents of those 2 young girls essentially try to get them exorcised, and it's a basic plot, but having 2 of them, I don't remember if the other Exorcist movies. I've only ever seen the first one. I've always heard the third one's great. But do they have multiple people
too?
Possessed?
They branch. I know the second one follows Father Damien, who's from the first one. And then I don't know where they go after that. But like, it's not like a franchise that you would think that's like fully connected with like the same characters kind of pass through from one to one. So I want to transition over to a story that Kevin's going to tell. Because every once in a while through this work, we get to interview people who we are huge fans of that are not connected to film at all. Jake, if Jake were going to be here, I wanted him to tell the story of getting to go to Carnegie Hall. He went to Carnegie Hall as part of the press tour for Maestro. And that's an opportunity that you wouldn't assume that you would get doing the movie beat. But when they do something for a film, you get a chance to go and experience something really fun. Tom DeLonge, who is a hero of both Kevin's and mine, huge fan. Obviously, he's from Blink-182, Angels and Airwaves. He did Boxcar Racer with Travis Barker, and and he's been on the UFO beat for a really long time. And, you know, has been vindicated a bit from some of the information that's been coming out. And,
aliens exist, man. He wrote that in 99. And
yes. And he, you know, gets name dropped by the people who were testifying before Congress because of information that he is either pushed for or. So he made a movie called Monsters of California. And if I've only seen the trailer, I have a screener link for it. I thought it looked really good. I
dug it.
Yeah, Gabe and I were talking about the fact that like you almost expected it to be this sort of rough, you know, Super 8 type thing of like teenagers who stumble upon information about aliens as they're figuring out what happened to one of the main character's missing fathers. But Kev, more importantly than that, I want to know just what it was like talking to Tom DeLonge. Like he's in the middle of Blink's European tour. They are quite possibly, I mean, obviously Taylor Swift is Taylor Swift, but they are having a moment right now. They're back and big with their album on the way out. So what was it like getting a chance to interview him for this?
Well, first of all, yeah, and I'll talk about the movie as well. But Blink, Sean and I have talked about Blink a lot. I've seen Blink probably 5 or 6 times. I just saw them recently in DC. I've seen Plus 44 live. I've seen, you know, I've been such a big fan of just the whole Blink family for a long time. And I know Plus 44 was Mark and Travis.
Whatever they all go to do, I tend to follow them with it. You know, like
yeah, 100%.
If they're involved, if one of the members is involved, I follow them.
Yeah, and so obviously with the strike, I've been trying to find other routes to do interviews, and I know that he had this film coming out, and so I reached out to his publicist, and it was like a few weeks ago, and they were like, yeah, well, he's on tour right now, he might not be available up like until like October 2nd to do press, but he's going to be international at that point. I think he was in Portugal when we spoke. Wow. And it was a whole thing. Originally, it was just going to be like an audio thing. And then I was like, well, can we try for video? Because there could be like Wi-Fi and you know, where he's at. And so we ended up doing the interview like at 8:20 in the morning Eastern. And he had a show like hours later in Portugal that night. So, you know, with the time difference, it worked out. And part of me, I was, you know, I'm such a big fan of his music, and I own all the vinyl for Blink-182. I mean, their music hits me on a level that I can't even explain. You know, a lot of their songs, their self-titled record to me is my favorite just because it feels really cinematic. There's a lot of great storytelling in there with the letters they're reading from the war and things like that. And so that album really struck me. And then Angels and Airwaves was a huge band for me as well, just because they're
hugely cinematic. Also, the way that they compose their music is like, it feels like it belongs with some type of sci-fi epic film.
Right. And every time I would, you know, anytime I listen to Angels and Airwaves, Angels and Airwaves kind of puts me into a cinematic mood. And, you know, their drummer for the Angels and Airwaves actually scored the film, which is really cool. So the movie's called Monsters of California. And so I'm at work and I'm like, there's no way Tom DeLonge is actually going to pop up on my Zoom here. And keep in mind, we've interviewed really famous people in our lives, but when you interview a rock star that you've been watching and listening to since you were 15 years old. I mean, I remember when What's My Age Again video premiered. I remember buying Enema of the State with my dad in San Francisco. We were on vacation at the time. I remember when you take off your pants and jacket, when that album was released, they had like 3 different versions that you could get. One was like the Tom, Mark, and Travis version or whatever. And I remember like it was so cool if you got this version or that version. And then the Mark, Tom, and Travis live show. And there's so many aspects of their career
phenomenal. That album's so great.
I listened to it on vinyl last night. I mean, it was like it felt like I was there at the show. So Tom DeLonge pops up on my Zoom screen, and it was just wild. Like I kind of like. I told myself beforehand I don't want to fanboy, but it was one of those things, dude. I've been trying to buy his new Stratocaster. They released these Tom DeLonge Stratocasters like a couple months ago from Fender, like a reissue from like years ago.
Is it brown with the stripe, or is it like white like the one he's playing now?
They have it's the Strat, so they had a yellow, black, blue, and a green one, a surf green, and I've been trying to get it for months, and it's been sold out like crazy. And I told Tom DeLonge at the end of the interview, I was like, dude, please tell Fender to put more of those out. And he said something along the lines of, he goes, crazy how much those are selling. He goes, they have Kurt Cobain and Jimi Hendrix versions that are still available, but mine for some reason is like selling out. And to Sean's point, they're having a big moment right now. And so weirdly enough, when I got off the call, I checked the website one more time. I've been my 25th time checking it, and there was one available, and I nailed it. I got it.
Get out of here.
So
I thought you were going to tell me he sent you one, which would have been awesome.
No. That would have been awesome. No. I did purchase it. That would have been cool. So he comes up on the screen, and yeah, it was wild, man. It was Tom DeLonge. It was this guy that I've seen in concert so many times. Like, there's a difference in talking to actors than a rock star. A rock star is and I had just seen them. Sean and I have talked about them all the time. And when he popped up, he's a really fascinating guy. And if you get a chance, it's just a 10-minute interview. It's on YouTube. He's really fascinating in terms of his film.
Look for it in the description or in the little notifications.
He's really fascinating guy about the way, because when you approach songwriting versus filmmaking, and also if you haven't seen the trailer for Monsters of California, he uses like a really interesting version of Aliens Exist in the trailer. And so for people who aren't familiar with the film, like Sean basically described, it's a group of like teenagers essentially who are dealing with some paranormal activity of some sort in Southern California. It has like a Stranger Things vibe to it. Richard Kind is great in this movie. Like,
cool,
it's like
got him.
An amazing performance. And Casper
Van
Starship
Casper
Troopers.
Yeah.
He's really good at it too. It was kind of like a whole throwback. The movie works. And there's like 3 Angels and Airwaves songs in the film. There's like a Tom DeLonge song in there as well. I think from his solo album To the Stars. I think that's what it was. It's available in theaters, in select theaters, and it's also available on demand, like if you have Apple or iTunes. I dug it, but I also dug it because I was watching it thinking about Tom directing it and like how like this musician that I've been following for years in Angels and Airwaves, like that he's behind the camera telling this story, and it just felt different that way. And what's great about it, one of the answers that he gave me, we were talking about like because he uses score and soundtrack in the film, and his drummer from Angels and Airwaves scored the film. He was
an awesome drummer. I think he drummed for Nine Inch Nails. I think he was the drummer for Nine Inch Nails.
He's amazing. And but in total Tom DeLonge fashion, like he throws in like a lot of the immature jokes in the interview. The interview is pretty not safe for work. There's a lot of like bad language in it, but it was just funny to hear him throw out the jokes that I've seen him throw out on stage so many times. I think, listen, this is coming from a very personal place for him. He's very passionate about this subject matter. So when someone's passionate about what they're doing, and they tell a story about what they're passionate about, the passion comes through. It's there. Tom's voice is all over the movie. It's it's one of those things, and the kids are great in it. The cast is really solid. I mean, is it the best movie I've ever seen? No, but I mean, if you're a Blink fan and you are familiar with Tom's work in Angels and Airwaves, it's right up. This is. I mean, it's catnip. It's literally like what you know. Yeah,
that you got the chance to do this, man. I'm so jealous.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say about it is this: one of the things I love about like Tom is, first of all, like they're great writers, right? I mean, and they're dealing with thematics that we can all relate to, as I said. But I just genuinely, it was an amazing opportunity. I was so happy I got a chance to just talk to the guy. And at the end of the day, I am a fan. But it was just weird to see Tom DeLonge on my Zoom screen, and he was in Portugal, and he took the time to do it before his show. So I'm excited, and the guitar comes tomorrow, so I'm gonna learn some Blink stuff over the weekend. So, awesome. But yeah, the movie's out this weekend. Please, yeah, if you're a fan, check it out. I mean, it's definitely, and Sean and I have shared our love for the band over the years, and
where's it available again?
So you can see it in select theaters. I think across the country, it's playing in like certain theaters. Just if you go to his Instagram or Twitter, you can find a list. If not, it's playing on demand. So if you have Apple TV or iTunes or things like that, you can get it there. But yeah, no, it was really special talking to him. So.
All right, well, let's get back to time travel movies. I want to ask everybody in the comments down below, tell me your all-time favorite or best even time travel movie not named Back to the Future. I'm going to take Back to the Future out of the conversation. Any of the 3, I'm taking them out of the conversation. Yeah. Give me your best time travel film that's outside of that franchise. You can even use Totally Killer if you want to. You can follow us online at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, at Sean_O'Connell, at Gabe Kovac, and at ReelBlend. It's Kevin McCarthy TV. He is not the Speaker of the House. Send him your Blink recommendations.
Not anymore, Sean.
Not anymore. Very true. And we'll be back next week with a brand new interview. And as Kevin said, we are pursuing some really exciting interviews as we get into the awards season. So make sure you keep it right here on ReelBlend. We'll talk to you guys very, very soon.
Pay your actors.
The man who moved the earth.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. We're shuffling it around.
Yeah, why not?